It felt like we were peeling back another layer of Jesus' passion, of all that he went through, all that Jesus had to endure. And each reading opened up for us a different aspect of all that he went through. First, we have the reading which reflected Judas's betrayal. I must admit, I don't think I will quite ever understand what was going through Judas's head. How, after following Jesus for 3 years, seeing all the miracles, hearing all the teachings, is it possible for him to betray Jesus? And yet he does just that. With a kiss, no less. Commentaries and others often try to explain what Judas's motivations might have been. He certainly was one of the trusted, the inner circle. He was the treasurer of the group. And yet, for one reason or another, he felt motivated to do this, to hand Jesus over, knowing that crucifixion, that death and destruction awaited. Some commentaries think that Judas might have been trying to force Jesus' hand, to force him to come into his power fully and to cause the kingdom to be incarnated in that moment. I just can't see that. I can't see how one who loved Jesus so much would have possibly been able to do that, to chance the fact that Jesus would not react the way I anticipated. I think just as importantly, Judas is betraying not only Jesus but himself. He's betraying what he truly knows and understands. And he loses not only Jesus, but himself in his betrayal. But what must Jesus have felt, knowing this one whom you loved, whom you trusted, who had followed you, whom you chose, was going to betray you? The reading about the desertion of the rest of the disciples is just as poignant. 1 minute they're all there. Yes, they are sleeping. They're not fully present in that moment, but they're there. And Jesus knows they're there. I would suppose it's like any one of us who is sleeping in a strange place, but knows someone is sleeping in the room next to us, or perhaps in the bed next to us. Just the fact of knowing they're there brings some comfort. Perhaps that's what Jesus felt in the garden as well. Knowing all that was about to happen, he at least had those 11 men who had followed him there in the garden with him. What must it have been like that as he is grabbed by the officers of the high priest, all of them desert him. Not one stays. Not one lingers. No one that he can see. They all vanish into the night, rather like a mist disappearing when the morning comes. Suddenly being deserted by those whom he trusted and loved must have wounded him deeply. What must he have felt? The most familiar reading was probably the third for most of us. Peter's denial of Jesus. However, Luke adds one aspect to it that the other Gospels don't. In Luke's version, Jesus and Peter make eye contact. You may not have heard that, but as Peter says the last time, "I don't know him," Jesus turns and looks at him. Imagine for a moment the electricity that goes between those gazes. As Peter suddenly realizes everything that Jesus had prophesied came true, and as Jesus realizes he has now been totally and completely denied. What must that have felt like? These first three readings focus completely on the emotional pain this night caused Jesus. Starting with the betrayal of one of his disciples, moving to the desertion of all of them, and finally, most poignantly, the denial by the disciple whom he had chosen to lead his church. What must Jesus have been feeling? But it's not enough for Jesus to suddenly be torn apart emotionally. We move on to the physical aspect of his suffering in the account of the crucifixion. Crucifixion, that ancient form of execution, intentionally meant to produce as much pain as possible for as long as possible, taxing every muscle, every sinew, every fiber of the victim's body. And Jesus endures it all. He has already been scourged, had the crown of thorns plaited and placed upon his brow, carried his cross through the streets, having insults hurled at him, his body beaten and bleeding, and then finally, he is lifted onto the cross, unable to breathe, unless he causes himself more pain by lifting his body to do so. He is emotionally and physically distressed, and that's not enough. The account this evening not only speaks of Jesus' emotional passion, his physical passion, but also speaks of his spiritual passion. The gospel readings indicate that Jesus is on the cross for more than 3 hours. And in those moments when he is on the cross, he speaks numerous but disjointed phrases. Sometimes the crowd gathered doesn't even understand quite what he is saying. A couple of the words that he speaks are addressed to those in the crowd. But as we look at them, most of the words are addressed to his Father. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And finally, these words from Luke, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. After all that Jesus has gone through, his betrayal, the desertions, the denial, the passion of his crucifixion, it is this spiritual aspect that crushes his heart and causes his death. And we must ask, why? Why was this the Lamb of God allowed to go through this suffering, to endure this passion? For me and for you, so that we might know that by his stripes we are healed. By his blood we are forgiven. And in his name we are raised from the dead.